Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about depression and anxiety. Welcome to my show. Shame and guilt, two very early emotions, have a profound effect on how we feel in terms of depression and anxiety. Let me explain. So, when we're about, 18 months old, something like that, when we start developing our capacity to move away from people, talk to them, all those sorts of independence skills, we build a sense of capacity and competence, but we also start feeling shame because it's related. This feeling of shame is related to our failures, right? Every time you go to do something, you inevitably fail. So when you fail, guess what? It hurts. It may physically hurt. You're trying to walk, you fall down, hit your head against the table, it hurts. But there's also a sense of shame about it, like, oh man, I failed, right? So that sense of shame is very primitive. It's almost the first feeling, real human emotion that we experience. Prior to that is just about hunger and all of that stuff, right? But that sense of independence tells us that we should, the word should comes in, be able to do some things. And when we can't, again, the word can't comes in, then we feel a sense of shame. Got that so far? Perfect. Guilt is a much more sophisticated application of shame. So it is really shame in the context of social relationships or relationships alone. The way guilt works, and it comes about age 3 and 4 years, or maybe even a little later, when we start building that capacity for perception of other people. Prior to that, we're just a narcissistic protoplasm, right? All we think about is ourselves. Look how great I am. Look how fantastic I am. I can walk. I can talk. Ooh, excellent, right? After that, after we kind of satisfy our sense of narcissistic self, we start developing a capacity for others. So that's when parents start talking about, you hurt my feelings. If you do this, it'll make mommy very happy, or daddy will be very proud of you, or all those sort of classic prototypical things that kids hear. And then beyond that, if you're starting in preschool or some sort of after school program or daycare, you start dealing with other human beings, teachers, other kids who are going to evaluate you. You can start building relationships. When you mess things up, when you feel like you have hurt somebody else, your feeling of guilt shows up. That's when the feelings of guilt begin to emerge. So shame earlier, when applied to social settings, it becomes guilt in a way, right? It doesn't take shame away, it's still there. But those two become distinct. Relationship failure, community failure, social failure is guilt. Individual failure is shame. Now, what does that have to do with depression and anxiety? First, we have to talk about two things. One, depression and anxiety are really the same side of the coin, and that all of us experience them at some point. It doesn't have to do with sadness, nor does it have to do with fear, right? Fear and sadness are natural events that have a cause, that have an identifiable purpose, and they are transitory, fantastic emotions to have, good things to have as human beings in the full spectrum of our emotions. Depression and anxiety are not necessarily with a cause. There is nothing you can pinpoint to and say, this is making me depressed. Some things make you sad, but depression is a state of being. So is anxiety. Now, sometimes we take that anxiety and we associate it with something, right? Like phobias. I'm afraid of heights, or I'm afraid of bees, or whatever. That's anxiety sort of targeted at a particular thing. But generally speaking, anxiety doesn't have a cause. With that said, it's important for us to also know that depression and anxiety work together. They're the same coin, two sides. Depression brings our system down, our energy levels down. Anxiety heightens them. When the system goes too low, before you pass out on the floor, your body kicks in and brings up anxiety. Before your system goes up too high with anxiety, your system essentially shuts down and goes down below. So you kind of vacillate between the two. I have never treated anybody who has had anxiety without depression and depression with anxiety. I don't know if other clinicians have. You can always find both of those in some formulation or some amount ratios together. So with that said, what's the influence of shame and guilt on depression and anxiety? Well, depression that is guilt-based has to do with social settings. Those are the kinds of depressions where you beat yourself up. If you listen to your conversations, you say, I am a failure at relationships. I can never make friends. Nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. If your sentences are relationally based, you're experiencing a guilt sense. If your sentences are individually based, which is, I can never do anything right. I'm ugly. I'm a failure. I am an imposter, right? I have made all the successes, but I fooled everybody. I really don't know how to do what I'm doing. I'm a terrible artist. I'm a terrible doctor. All that stuff. That's shame-based. Those two make it distinctly different types of feelings, types of depression. And your approach to helping yourself with those is distinctly different. In treatment, there are distinctly different ways of approaching them. The first one, the shame, is a matter of skill building and evaluating based on standards, right? So I'm a terrible doctor. Well, what do you know? I got A's in college. My patients are happy with me. I've had no malpractice suits. I'm pretty good, right? So there's a way to combat that. There's a way to evaluate that. And then go deeper and say, all right, if realistically your standards are being met for being a good doctor, what's driving the sense of shame? And we go backwards and usually find out the source. Guilt, on the other hand, brings this relational issue where you're always a burden on somebody, or nobody loves you, or that people are going to criticize you because you're a terrible person. That has to do with guilt and a relational issue that has a different approach. Kind of think about those as two distinct forms of depression and anxiety, but depression and anxiety go together. All right, I hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe. Please click on that bell to make sure that you get subscription notices, and invite your friends and family, so share the link with them. And you think about my videos. What can I do to make them better? Tell me. I'm no good at this stuff. This is my starting point.